Hey everyone, we are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers and we really need your help. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button as we get started. Skol Vikings fans, hit that like button right now and subscribe if you are not already part of this community, because what we are about to break down today is one of the most genuinely debated, hotly contested, passionately argued draft weekends this franchise has produced in years. The 2026 NFL Draft is done. The picks are in. The grades are out. And the Minnesota Vikings fanbase is absolutely, completely, 100% split right down the middle on whether new interim GM Rob Brzezinski just laid the foundation for something special or handed opposing quarterbacks a free pass to carve up a secondary that was already crying out for help. We have got 9 picks to break down, grades to hand out, fan reactions that range from pure excitement to genuine outrage, and one specific decision that has people in this fan base asking very uncomfortable questions about the direction of this team. So grab your purple gear, get comfortable, and let us get into every single detail because this one is going to be a ride from start to finish. But before we even talk about the draft itself, we need to acknowledge the wreckage that preceded it because context matters enormously here. The Vikings handed the starting quarterback job to J.J. McCarthy last season, and the results were, to put it as kindly as possible, not what anyone was hoping for. 10 starts. A 6-4 record that honestly looked more flattering than the actual performance deserved. A 57.6% completion rate. 11 touchdowns against 12 interceptions. And the single most painful statistical achievement possible, the lowest passer rating among all qualifying quarterbacks in the entire league. The entire league. Every starting quarterback who took enough snaps to qualify, and J.J. McCarthy was at the absolute bottom of that list. That is a fact that stings no matter how much you believe in his potential or his upside or his national championship pedigree from Michigan. And then, because the universe apparently decided Vikings fans had not suffered enough, Sam Darnold, the quarterback Minnesota let walk in free agency after he had a genuinely brilliant season wearing purple, went to Seattle and won a Super Bowl. A Super Bowl. With a team that was not even supposed to be the favorite. The man the Vikings decided was not worth keeping went on to achieve the single greatest accomplishment a quarterback can achieve in professional football, and Vikings fans had to watch it happen knowing they had that guy in their building and chose to move on. Sleep well, everyone. So yes, the front office came into this offseason with serious questions to answer and serious credibility to rebuild. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was fired after 4 seasons. Kyler Murray was brought in on a 1-year deal to compete with McCarthy for the starting spot. The roster was shaken up significantly to address cap issues, which meant veteran departures and glaring holes that needed to be filled. Rob Brzezinski stepped in as interim GM with the entire franchise watching to see what kind of leader he would be when the pressure was real. The 2026 NFL Draft was his first real test. 9 picks. 9 chances to make a statement about what Minnesota football is going to look like going forward. And the statement he made was loud, clear, and impossible to misinterpret. Defense. Physicality. Nastiness up front. Big bodies, mean attitudes, and a commitment to building the kind of trench identity that wins games in January when the weather gets ugly and football becomes a war of attrition. The message started even before the draft began, actually, because Brzezinski opened his draft weekend by having breakfast with Scott Studwell, Vikings Ring of Honor linebacker, former franchise scout, the all-time leading tackler in team history. A man who spent nearly 2 decades in that front office building physical, tough, hard-nosed Minnesota football teams. That breakfast was not a coincidence. That was a signal. That was Brzezinski telling the league and the fan base exactly whose philosophy he was drawing from and exactly what kind of football team he intends to build. Round 1, pick 18, Caleb Banks, defensive tackle out of Florida. 6'6", 327 pounds, with movement skills and athleticism that have absolutely no business being attached to a human being of that size. Now, the Vikings had real and urgent need at defensive tackle because they lost both Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave this offseason while navigating the cap crunch. 2 veteran, established defensive tackles gone in the same offseason. That is a massive void to fill, and Banks is the bet that this front office made to address it. Some analysts handed this pick a C grade because of the injury history, And that concern is completely legitimate. Banks missed most of the 2025 season with a broken foot and then re-injured that same foot at the combine, which naturally scared teams off and caused his stock to slide. But here is the thing: Brzezinski and head coach Kevin O'Connell both said clearly after the pick. They did not believe Banks would still be available at 18 under normal circumstances. Teams were reportedly eyeing him in the 20s before the injury concerns reshuffled the board. The Vikings took advantage of a slide and grabbed a player with genuine all-pro potential at a spot where they should not have been able to get him. If Banks is healthy by training camp, which current reports suggest is realistic, this pick looks like a steal in 2 years. If the foot becomes a chronic problem, it looks like a costly gamble. That is the nature of the swing, and sometimes in the NFL draft you have to take the swing. Round 2, pick 51, Jake Goldie, linebacker out of Cincinnati. 6'4", 239 pounds, a former edge rusher with real versatility and the kind of rangy athleticism that Brian Flores absolutely loves to work with in his defensive system. Goldie is being looked at as a potential successor to Andrew Van Ginkel in that unique hybrid role that Flores has used so effectively, and watching the development of that specific position battle is going to be one of the most fascinating storylines of training camp. This pick earned a B grade, and honestly, given the upside and the scheme fit, that might even be slightly conservative depending on how his development goes under Flores. Round 3 brought 2 picks that really started to flesh out the identity of this class in exciting ways. Pick 82, Dominique Orange out of Iowa State, already going by the nickname Big Citrus, which is quite possibly the best nickname any Vikings draft pick has ever arrived with, and I will personally be using it for the rest of my natural life. He is a run-stopping interior force, a genuine load in the middle of the defensive line, and pairing him with Banks gives this defense a young, hungry, physical front that the Vikings have not had in quite some time. Big Citrus earned a B+ grade, and that feels exactly right. Pick 97, Caleb Tielemans out of Northwestern, 6'8" and 323 pounds at offensive tackle. He is a swing tackle option who could realistically see meaningful snaps given how many injury combinations this offensive line burned through last season. Pick 98, Jacob Thomas, safety out of Miami. Tackling machine, 5 pass breakups in college, and perhaps most importantly, there is already a highlight circulating of this man literally waving an opponent toward him on a kick return before delivering a hit that can only be described as an absolute statement. The attitude alone on that play tells you everything about what kind of player Thomas is and what kind of energy he is going to bring to that locker room. Day 3 of the draft brought some genuinely fun additions. Max Breedson, a fullback from Michigan who was part of the national championship team and whose draft party was attended by none other than J.J. McCarthy, his former Michigan teammate, which is a small moment but a genuinely cool one for team chemistry. Charles Demings, a corner out of Stephen F. Austin with infectious energy and legitimate physical tools for a small school prospect. Demond Claiborne out of Wake Forest, one of the fastest running backs in this entire draft class, who also happened to squat 500 pounds at a body weight of 187 pounds, which is a combination of speed and power that is frankly absurd and earned him an A grade as a potential steal of the class. And finally, Gavin Gerhardt at center in the 7th round, a sensible addition following Ryan Kelly's retirement after dealing with multiple concussions throughout his career. 9 picks. Heavy on defense. Big, physical, mean up front. The DNA of this draft class is unmistakable. But here is where the conversation gets genuinely complicated and where the fan base has fractured in a way that is not going to resolve itself quietly. The secondary. Because while all of this trench investment was happening, the Vikings passed on Dylan Thieneman, the safety who was the most commonly projected first-round pick from external analysts, a player described repeatedly as a perfect fit for Brian Flores's defensive system with his versatility, his football IQ, and his range. Multiple mock drafts had him going to Minnesota. The fan base had largely convinced themselves it was going to happen. And then the Vikings took Banks instead and moved on without addressing the safety position in the first round at all. And then, at the end of round 3, Jermaine McCoy, a cornerback with genuine talent and real NFL tools, was sitting right there available. The Vikings passed on him. The Las Vegas Raiders grabbed him at pick 101. That one is legitimately difficult to rationalize no matter how much you trust the overall vision of the draft, because McCoy was right there and the secondary absolutely needed attention. Harrison Smith, the face of Vikings defensive backfields for 14 years, is gone after his release, and the organization does not even have a firm final answer yet on whether he is officially retiring. There is a significant hole at safety, and the response to that hole in the first 3 rounds was essentially Jacob Thomas, a developmental player still finding his footing at the position. Now the front office pushed back on the McCoy situation by pointing to his knee injury that kept him off the field for all of 2025, and they noted that multiple organizations apparently shared similar reservations about that knee. That adds context but does not fully remove the sting. And on the Thieneman decision, Brzezinski's team said clearly they drafted their board, that they were not setting out to go defense heavy for the sake of it but simply followed what the board dictated. Their belief was that Banks was a better value at 18 than any other option available, and they committed to that evaluation fully. The fan reactions running through the mailbag capture this divide perfectly. On one side you have people pointing out correctly that 6 other teams also passed on Thieneman before he was eventually selected, so the idea that Minnesota made some glaring, obvious mistake that every other smart organization would have avoided is not entirely fair. If the league as a whole was that high on Thieneman, he would not have been available at 18 in the first place. On the other side you have very legitimate concerns about a secondary that is now heading into 2026 without Harrison Smith, without a proven cornerback solution, and with 2 developmental players in Thomas and Demings being asked to hold things together while the rest of the roster catches up. In the NFC, where the margin for error is genuinely razor-thin, that is a real vulnerability. Here is where this honest assessment lands. The vision Rob Brzezinski showed with this draft is coherent, it is philosophically grounded, and it reflects a genuine understanding of what Brian Flores needs to run his defense at maximum effectiveness. Elite defensive line play is not a nice thing to have in the modern NFL. It is a requirement for deep playoff runs. Every team that has made a meaningful postseason run in recent years has had interior disruption that changes the math for opposing offenses. Banks and Big Citrus and Jalen Redmond coming off a breakout 2025 season gives Flores a legitimate rotation to work with up front, and that is the foundation of everything Flores wants to do defensively. The commitment to that philosophy is clear and it is defensible. What keeps you up at night is the combination of injury risk at the top of the class, the unresolved secondary questions, and the elephant in the room that is the quarterback competition between Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy. Because all of this defensive investment only matters if the offense can stay on the field long enough to let it work. Rookie minicamp opens to the public on May 8th, and that is going to be the first real look at how this class moves and competes. And hanging over everything is the reality that Brzezinski is still interim. Everything he just did this weekend is essentially his job application for the permanent position. The decision on whether he gets that title is coming, and whoever makes that call is going to be shaping the direction of this franchise for years. The 2026 NFL Draft did not solve every problem the Vikings have. No single draft ever does. But it showed a front office with a clear identity, a real philosophy, and a willingness to commit to a long-term vision even when the short-term fan reaction is complicated. Whether that vision is enough, whether Banks stays healthy, whether the secondary survives the season, whether one of those quarterbacks emerges as a legitimate answer, those questions do not have answers yet. But for the first time in a while, at least there is a direction. And for a Vikings fan who has watched this team break hearts in ways that still do not make complete sense, a clear direction feels like progress. That is everything we have got for you today, and if you made it all the way to the end, you are exactly the kind of passionate, detail-obsessed Vikings fan that this community was built for. Now I need you to do 3 things right now. Hit that like button because it genuinely helps this channel grow and takes you 0 seconds. Drop a comment below and tell me where you stand. Do you trust Brzezinski's vision, or do you think this draft left too many holes in the secondary? The comment section is where this community lives, and I want to hear your honest take. And if you are not subscribed yet, fix that immediately because we are pushing hard towards 6,000 subscribers and every single one of you matters to what we are building here. Thank you for watching, thank you for the support, and as always, Skol Vikings. See you in the next one.